Greetings. Today we will look at some commonly used logical fallacies in dog nutter rhetoric. You can consider this the dog critic's guide to logical fallacies. I'm often asked, why focus on dogs? Well, the answer is simple, and I quote,
"The dog is the pet animal with the greatest impact on our daily lives, creating unnecessary danger, noise, pollution, cost, and intrusion. It is the pet animal with the most vocal and oppressive supporters, and it is the pet animal above all others that has myths, propaganda, slogans, misinformation, and downright lies associated with it."
In debates with dog apologists, you will find that they often tend to use poor knowledge, bad reasoning, or deception to argue their side, or perhaps some combination thereof. But now you will be able to identify and counter some very common pro-dog logical fallacies as you encounter them. Before moving on, it is worth noting that if something has merit, its defense will not rely on predictable stock responses that are purely fallacious and rhetorical in nature and often flat-out incorrect.
A red herring is basically a distraction. This is an attempt to shift the focus away from a topic or a relevant point. This is accomplished by introducing an irrelevant and unrelated point. This is a change of topic and a thread derailment. We probably encounter this one more than any other fallacy. It seems to be a favorite of the dognut ideologue. For example, when you are talking about how much of a problem dog attacks are, and someone starts talking about something completely different. Examples include crimes committed by humans, traffic accidents, other pets, natural disasters, suicide rates, or wild animal attacks. Here, it's usually best to bring the focus back onto the subject of dogs, and to remind your interlocutor that the actual topic is dogs, and not anything else. Conversely, I have found that these people seem to be incapable of understanding the fact that they are using fallacious logic. It may also be prudent to realize that it may be worth disengaging, once you've pointed out their error to them, only for them to persist, to try and shift the focus away from dogs. Here, I will use a post which Chef Mutt Meat made a couple of years ago, as it puts this into perspective. She was kind enough to record the audio, reading out her own post. It is also a point we've had to make before.
Alligators aren't being brought into grocery stores. People aren't posing their infants in pictures with tigers. Wolves aren't forced upon us in restaurants by nutters who insist that only a mindless beast can aid their mysterious and unspecified disability. Mountain lions aren't being laid on top of children inappropriately who have their gums and blood exposed in dentist offices.
In other words, our critique has nothing to do with animals we aren't forced to encounter on a regular basis. A specific type of red herring, which again is a deliberate or unintentional distraction from the actual issue at hand, is the fallacy of relative privation. It is also known as the appeal to bigger problems. Here, I will use a post I saw a while back on one of Ranty McDog Hates videos.
Bruh, what is wrong with you weirdos? You got real issues in this world like human sex trafficking and you're worried about dogs.
Implying that we should ignore one problem because of the existence of another makes no sense. Notice how they dishonestly referred to other things besides dogs as, quote, real problems. As if dogs weren't a serious issue or something. Always remember, the entire point of this is to distract you. These people want you to think about literally anything other than dogs. In instances like this, you can also remind them that it is entirely possible to care about multiple issues at once, and that separate issues can be addressed individually. The absurd logical conclusion of this would be only being concerned with the one problem that is worse than all the others, and considering all else trivial and inconsequential. Just because cancer kills more people than homicide does not mean we should not be opposed to homicide. They are basically going, well, other things are a problem too, so forget your legitimate grievances with dogs. They themselves do not care about the other problems they are attempting to distract you with. Before I knew this was a formal fallacy, I thought this was something only assholes say. This particular comment is a form of gaslighting, as it subtly implies that we do not care about, quote, real issues. Don't let someone else tell you what you should care about.
Next up, ad hominem logical fallacy. This is when your interlocutor attacks your character instead of your argument. It is an attempt to invalidate your position based on a personal trait or some irrelevant fact about yourself. They do this instead of providing an actual argument that you are incorrect about anything. This could also involve a personal insult in lieu of an actual counterargument as well. For example, you are stupid, therefore you are wrong about dogs. Or, you are not a dog person, therefore I cannot trust what you say. A common variant of this is that nonsense which nutters say about how they don't trust anyone who doesn't like dogs. Of course, in the real world, we know that there is nothing about a dislike of dogs that denotes a lack of trustworthiness, and this is a dismissive and audacious sentiment. Obviously, disliking dogs does not automatically make a person untrustworthy, and there are many things to dislike about dogs. The dog defender simply refuses to confront those very real things about dogs, which others have good reasons to not like. This is an indication that your interlocutor either has no argument or understands on some level that they are wrong and you are right. It could also mean that your argument is strong and that they can't counter it. Here, you could prompt them to attack your argument and not your character, which is irrelevant. You can say things like, focus on the position, not the person. And as with most any fallacy, simply inform them that this is not an argument, that you're factually incorrect about anything you've stated.
Another common fallacy is a strawman argument, or attack. This is a distorted misrepresentation, or caricature, of your actual position. Basically, when they employ this fallacy, they will attempt to distort your position in order to make it easier to attack. Usually they will argue against an exaggerated or simply inaccurate version of your real argument. Here is a common example. Suppose one person says,
"We should give better study guides to students."
and someone responds by saying,
"Why should we just give everyone an easy A?"
A couple of years ago, I uploaded a video where I made various points. In this fairly long video, I may have mentioned that dogs are carnivores, but that was not the main point of it at all. A commenter replied by saying something that would lead other readers to believe that I said dogs are bad simply because they eat meat. However, I have never made this point. Of course, it is a lot easier to knock down a much weaker version of an opponent's argument. This may be the product of misunderstanding or ignorance, or it may well be dishonesty at work. In this case, all you can do is point out that they are arguing against a position which you have not presented and which no one has in the actual exchange at hand.
An appeal to tradition or appeal to common practice is the fallacy that's invoked when someone claims that something is right or that it should be practiced based solely on the fact that others are doing it, or that simply because a thing has been done for a long time, it is good and should be done.
This is right, because we have always done it this way.
In this case, we can see it every time a dog defender tries to tell you all about how humanity has been involved with dogs for hundreds of thousands of years, and all the rest of it. And a while back, I saw a great counter to this. The commenter basically said that this is something only some humans have done. Here is what they wrote.
What does this have to do with me? I did not domesticate a wild canine, and I am not in some parasitic or allegedly symbiotic relationship with any dogs. I do not need a sled to be pulled, and I do not live on a farm. You may want a dog, but I do not.
Next is circular reasoning, also known as circular logic. This is a fallacy where your opponent begins and ends with the exact same premise, or, to put it another way, they begin with their conclusion. Here, your interlocutor is presupposing or assuming that their conclusion is true, and then they are using that assumption as the basis of their argument.
Why should I?
Because I said so.
Is a good example of circular reasoning. Note how this does not provide a valid reason to support a claim, but simply restates it. Here are a couple more examples.
Everyone loves Rebecca because she is so popular.
You must obey the law because it is illegal to break the law.